Okay, so for people in their 20s, 30s, and beyond, 40s, etc., whose testosterone and estrogen levels are at the appropriate ratios and within the normal reference range, what can they do besides get great sleep, train but not too hard or too often, etc., etc.? What are some of the things in the realm of supplementation that can help them optimize their testosterone and estrogen without suppressing their own endogenous production of testosterone and estrogen?
Let's mention creatine as the first one. Creatine is interesting because it has multiple different effects. It helps with amino acid synthesis. It also helps with oxidative stress. It can also serve as the backup fuel tank for your mitochondria, so kind of holding backup ATP. And it does slightly increase total testosterone, and it also increases the conversion of testosterone to dihydrotestosterone. So potentially it's especially useful in men in even their teenage years and their 20s.
Does creatine supplementation increase the rate of hair loss?
Hair loss is not a reason to avoid taking creatine. Think of it as just bringing you to what you are naturally inclined to have.
Okay, so 5 grams a day of creatine for most people should be fine, beneficial for tissue volumizing, so strength, bringing water into the muscles, and for the cognitive effects and the clinical support for creatine, I think it's quite strong at the 5 gram per day dosage. So what other supplement-based tools can people consider?
Another one we can loop in with creatine is betaine. Some people are non-responders to creatine, so you can increase that to 10 grams, or you can use its cousin betaine to help with amino acid synthesis and shunting of energy. Along with that, I would put L-carnitine, which is actually the smallest peptide hormone. It's just 2 amino acids that are put together.
Betaine, do you recall what dosage people typically would take if they're a creatine non-responder?
1 to 3 grams. Several versions of creatine have betaine mixed in because it helps with the processing of methionine and homocysteine.
So if somebody is already taking creatine and likes it and responds to it, would adding betaine help, or is it redundant with creatine?
Only if their homocysteine is persistently elevated. And homocysteine is kind of like an inflammatory marker that can build up if you're not converting enough of it downstream.
How would I know?
Just a blood test.
Okay.
Or if you knew your MTHFR polymorphism, which is basically how you add methyl groups to many things in the body.
So L-carnitine, what are the ways to take L-carnitine? I know that there's an oral form, so capsules, and there's injectables. The injectables, I think you need a prescription. Is that right?
Correct. You need a prescription for the injectables, or you should really get a prescription for the injectables. L-carnitine potentially has localized effects if you inject it. If you ingest it orally, then it has a very low bioavailability, maybe only 10%.
So what are the dosages of L-carnitine that one needs to ingest then if they want to get a benefit? Because if only 10% is being absorbed, it's probably a lot of L-carnitine. Mm-hmm. How much should people take per day?
Usually I recommend for oral L-carnitine between 1,000 milligrams and up to 4,000 or 5,000 milligrams. If you're on that much, especially if you have a dysregulated gut microbiome, you should be concerned with TMAO, which is a potential carcinogen that both carnitine and choline can convert into. And your gut microbiota determine how much that happens.
So why should someone go through all of this? Is it to optimize testosterone? Is it working on the receptor side? What's L-carnitine doing?
It's a shuttle. So I think it's named carnitine palmitoyl coenzyme A. Basically, it just takes nutrients from outside your mitochondria and puts them in. It also has a unique effect, is that it increases the density of the androgen receptor in the cytoplasm of your cells. So even if your androgen receptor sensitivity doesn't change, and even if your testosterone does not change, you will have more testosterone binding to that increased number of receptors.
Does one need to cycle L-carnitine, creatine, betaine?
No reason to cycle any of those.
Okay, what other supplements can one use to try and improve hormone profiles? And here I realize we're using a very broad brush, because when we say improve hormone profiles, what are we really talking about? And for me, at least, I think about the subjective stuff. You know, do people feel like they are going to have more energy as a consequence of doing these things? Are they going to have more optimized libido? Are they going to have more optimized recovery from exercise, right? Because, I mean, it's not clear to me that taking one's testosterone from 600 to 800 is always going to be a good thing, especially if estrogen is increasing in parallel. That could cause issues. It could certainly make things better. It could certainly make things worse. So with that backdrop, what are some of the other things people can take? And then we'll go back to this issue of what really is optimization.
Let's briefly mention vitamin D, which is also a hormone. It's actually a sterol hormone. And if you have deficient vitamin D and you replace it, then you will optimize your testosterone. Let's also mention boron. So if you have a very high SHBG, boron can acutely help lower it, usually in a dose of 5 to 12 milligrams per day. It's not really a sustained effect, but boron is depleted in soils in many countries. I believe it's very high in soils in Greece and Turkey. So eating dates or raisins that are from those areas potentially have more boron. Boron also might be one of the reasons why the reference range for testosterone is much higher in those countries.
And just to remind people, the SHBG, sex hormone binding globulin, is attaching to the testosterone molecule and limiting the amount of so-called free testosterone that's available to have its impact on cells. Okay, so vitamin D3, I'm guessing you're talking about vitamin D3 specifically when you say vitamin D, and then boron 5 to 12 milligrams per day. And then what are some of the other things to optimize testosterone that are in supplement form?
Tongkat helps with the conversion of multiple key steps where you synthesize testosterone. Another, think of it as like a coenzyme or a cofactor, an upregulator of these steps is insulin and IGF-1. So a good rule of thumb is if you are not expecting as much growth hormone, insulin, and IGF-1, for example, lower carb diets, caloric deficits, you're trying to cut body fat or body weight, then Tongkat is going to be theoretically especially powerful.
What sorts of dosages of Tongkat do you recommend to your patients?
Anywhere from 300 to 1200 milligrams a day. With Tongkat, you need to be careful with the standardization because if you're thinking about a general Tongkat supplement, which is by far the most well-studied, then you're looking at the urecomanone content, which is a plant compound that is likely the main active pharmacologic effect. So that's the compound that's having the effect on the body. And if you standardize the urecomanone very, very high, then theoretically you're having more effect at a lower dose.
I take 400 milligrams of Tongkat Ali per day. I take it early in the day because it has a bit of a stimulant effect. And if I take it after 2 p.m., it starts to inhibit my sleep. I've been taking it for years and I rather like the effects. It seems subtle, but consistent. I've never cycled it. Do you recommend cycling it?
I don't see any reason to cycle it. There is a reason to cycle some supplements, but no reason to cycle Tongkat.
My blood work tells me that it causes an increase in free testosterone for me, and also a slight increase in luteinizing hormone for me. What are some of the other effects on various hormones that you've observed in the blood work of your patients taking Tongkat Ali?
Tongkat can also slightly increase DHEA, and if you have a very high SHBG, again, that's the protein that binds up your androgens and estrogens, an extremely important protein. The higher your SHBG, the more it helps decrease it. So they've studied Tongkat in populations with very normal SHBGs, and it does nothing for SHBG.
So if somebody has SHBG that's in the normal range, will taking Tongkat benefit them in any other way?
Yes, it'll increase their total and free testosterone.
Phaedogia agrestis, what dosages do you have patients take? I've heard of some potential toxicity to the testicular cells.
There was one study, and this is a rat study, but you can equate the dose of toxicity in rats and humans. In the rat dose that equates with humans that had no effect, so the safe dose, was an average of 300 milligrams a day.
So that would be 300 milligrams a day in humans is the dosage that did not have toxicity, correct?
Correct. And often, even if there is toxicity in rats, there is not toxicity in humans, so it's not directly equitable. But to be safe, another regimen that I have people take is 600 milligrams every other day or 600 milligrams 3 times a week, often Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
I've been taking Phaedogia for some period of time. All my markers and tests indicate that there's no toxicity, but I've been taking 600 milligrams per day, but I've been cycling it for about 8 to 12 weeks on and then a few weeks off. But based on what you're saying, I'm thinking maybe 3 times per week or every other day might be better.